In this lecture, we're going to discuss how to add styles to a component. There are a total of 3 blocks in a single file component. The template block is for your component's template code. You can insert expressions, directives, and use other components. The script block is for your component's options. This includes the data, methods, and business logic of your application. You will most likely use both blocks in almost every component. There is one additional block, which is the style block. Its purpose is simple. It's where we can define the styles for a component. We previously removed it. Let's add it back into the greeting component. From here, we can apply any stylings we like. Let's change the color of the paragraph to the color red. Next, let's try viewing the page again. Make sure your server is running by running the npm run dev command. After viewing the page, we will see the paragraph with the text color changed to red. This works, but it's not perfect just yet. We're going to inspect the element to view the paragraph styles. The color change is going to apply to all paragraph elements. It would be more ideal if the color change would apply to the paragraph elements in the component. The first solution would be to use IDs and classes. That would work, but Vue provides another solution you may want to consider. In the future, browsers will support something called the Shadow DOM. The Shadow DOM makes it possible to have multiple DOMs inside your document. The main benefit of the Shadow DOM is that it lives in its own little world. Any changes you make to that part of the page will only be reflected on that part. Vue is able to do something similar with its virtual DOM. You saw an example of this with the data property. Any data defined in a component is isolated to that component. Vue is able to isolate styles to a component. It borrows that idea from the Shadow DOM. The Shadow DOM is not to be confused with the virtual DOM. The virtual DOM is a JavaScript object that is a copy of the real DOM. The Shadow DOM is an isolated DOM from the real DOM. Let's learn how we can isolate styles to a component. First, let's create a paragraph tag outside of the greeting component. We'll add one inside the app component above the greeting component. It'll contain some static text. Next, switch back to the greeting component. We're going to add one simple attribute to the style block. The attribute we'll want to add is called scoped. By adding this attribute, Vue will compile the template while making sure the styles are only applicable to the component. To better understand what will happen, let's read the documentation. In the resource section of this lecture, I provide a link to the scoped CSS documentation page. Here is what Vue has to say about scoped CSS. When a style tag has the scoped attribute, its CSS will apply to elements of the current component only. This is similar to the style encapsulation found in Shadow DOM. It comes with some caveats, but it doesn't require any polyfills. Below are some examples. In the first code snippet, the scoped attribute is added to the style block. The second code snippet shows what the final result will be. Vue will add a data attribute to the elements from the component. The CSS selectors are modified to select an element based on the data attributes added to the elements. It's done for you automatically behind the scenes. This allows you to keep your code fairly minimal. We don't need to use ID or class names to achieve the same results. The styles we apply to a component will not affect elements outside of the component's template. Let's view the application one more time to see the result. There are 2 paragraph elements, one from the app component and another from the greeting component. We added a scoped style to the greeting component. It'll change the color of any paragraph elements to the color red. The paragraph inside the app component doesn't get changed to the color red. Only the paragraph tags inside the greeting component are changed. If we were to inspect the element, then we'll quickly find a data attribute has been added to the element as noted in the documentation. This was added in when the template file was compiled. One question I get asked is, why does Vue choose to mimic the behavior of the Shadow DOM instead of actually using the Shadow DOM? The Shadow DOM is not completely supported in all browsers. Therefore, Vue will simulate the behavior of a Shadow DOM by adding additional details to your component. Despite the change, the concept is still similar. We can continue to make changes to the paragraph tag or any other elements inside the component. Those stylings will only be applied to the component itself. Sometimes you may want to check if the stylings are correctly loading in the document. If we were to go to the head section of the document, we'll find a style tag that's been dynamically added. Vue will generate a style tag with the CSS you've written for the component. That's the basics of adding styles to your components. We've learned how powerful Scopes styles are. One of the major benefits of using scoped styles is that we didn't have to worry about dealing with classes or IDs. We didn't have to worry about stylings leaking into other areas of the page. This keeps our stylings clean and concise. We're using plain CSS at the moment. What if we wanted to use Sass? We'll look at how to use Sass in our application in the next lecture.